Hello dear viewers, I am Rudresh Aroli, Assistant Professor, Department of English, Sri C.C. Hebbal Government First Grade College, Golsandi. In today's lecture, I am going to explain you what is poetry, its meaning and some of the important definitions of poetry given by the eminent critics and poets. Many people, including poets themselves, often struggle to answer the question, what is poetry? I know that you have been in touch with poems and poetry since your school days. Remember some of the rhymes your teacher taught you, like twinkle, twinkle, little star, how I wonder what you are, up above the world so high like a diamond in the sky. Do you know who is the poet of this poem? Yes, it's Jane Taylor. Let's understand what is the meaning of poetry. Poetry is a collection of words that expresses emotion or idea. But every collection of words is not poetry or poem. To call a piece of writing poem, it should have some characteristic like rhyme, rhythm, length and lines. The terms poem, poetry, poetic and poetics seems to be necessarily frequent in critical writing, but various in their senses. They have different meanings. It's a literary attempt to share personal experiences and feelings, but sometimes a poem or poetry expresses universal idea too. The commonest use of poem, the commonest definition of poem is any composition in verse. That means whatever that is written in verse form is called poem or poetry. Here verse refers to technical conventions like rhyme, rhythm, line and length. The word poetry comes from the Greek word poiesis, which means making or a creation. But in our sense, in our discussion, poiesis means a verbal making or something created in words. Poetry not only uses words, but also form like sonnet, ode, ballad, and patterns of sound, imagery, and figurative language like simile, metaphor, alliteration to convey the message. To convey a message, poetry uses words, but not just words. It also uses forms of patterns of sounds, imagery, figurative language. Poetry has a long history, dating back to prehistoric times with hunting poetry in Africa and court poetry of the empires of the Nile, Niger and Volta river valleys. Vedas of Sanskrit languages, Zoroastrian Gathas and Homeric and Indian epics. All these are poets and they have a long history. Now we shall see some of the definitions of poetry. Webster's New Encyclopedic Poetry, Webster's New Encyclopedic Dictionary defines poetry. It's a writing in language chosen and arranged to create a particular emotional response through meaning, sound and rhythm. Robert Frost, an American poet, defines poetry, a kind of thing poet writes. Simple definition it is. Whatever that is written by poet is called poetry according to Robert Frost. J.S. Mill, a philosopher, a critic, a thinker of English literature, defines poetry as a feeling confessing itself to itself in moments of solitude. An important definition given by William Wordsworth, a romantic poet, is poetry is a spontaneous overflow of powerful feelings. It takes its origin from emotion recollected in tranquility. But it does not mean that the poet write whatever that poet write, but it doesn't mean that the poets write at the spur of the moment, but he writes after prolonged meditation. Poetry is not an emotional outburst, so to speak. At another place, Wordsworth says, Poetry is the breath and finer spirit of all knowledge. Matthew Bernard, a critic and poet, he defines poetry as simply the most beautiful, impressive, and widely effective mode of saying things. It's a mode of saying things, a medium of saying things, but it's not an ordinary way. It is beautiful, impressive, widely effective mode of saying things. And he also defines poetry as the criticism of life. P.B. Shelley, another romantic poet, defines poetry as the record of the best and happiest moments of the happiest and best mind. Poetry is the record of the best and happiest moments of the happiest and best mind. Now, we shall understand some of the characteristics of poetry. Poetry uses concentrated language. Less words, more meaning. It uses concentrated language. As I said already, words in poems are chosen, are selected. They are not arbitrarily used. All words are chosen carefully, and they are chosen for their sound and layers of meaning. Words in poem have different meanings, and they are selected by the poet because they have different layers of meaning. A word may not express only one meaning, it may express many meanings in poem. Often poetry uses language in a beautiful, creative, and expressive way. It uses strong feelings and emotions. One of the important characteristics of poetry is to express feelings. A personal confession is called poem. Words are internally arranged in stanzas to create rhythm and rhyme. It has rhyme and rhythm, and to create rhyme and rhythm, poets use words in a different form, in an arranged form. It contains imagery, symbolism, personification, etc., and sound effects like alliteration, onomatopoeia, assonance, etc. You are going to understand these things in the next discussion. It comes in a different forms and patterns. There are many forms of poetry. As I said, like ode, ballad, sonnet, dirge, etc. Poetry makes you see an aspect of life or the world in a new way. It gives you a different perspective of things in your life. It enables you to see the world in different way. Thank you for watching.